emotional cost of making more money is something almost no one talks about. People talk about the upside, the freedom, the security, the options, but they rarely talk about what it takes emotionally. Because if they did, more people would understand why growth isn't just a financial challenge, it's a psychological one. Let's start with a truth that surprises people. Making more money does not immediately reduce stress. In many cases, it increases it. Not because money is bad, but because growth changes your emotional landscape. More money introduces more responsibility, more visibility, more decision-making, more expectation, and the brain feels all of it. Now let's talk about the first emotional cost, pressure. When you make more money, your margin increases, but so does pressure. Pressure to maintain, pressure to not mess it up, pressure to justify success, pressure to make smart choices. At lower income levels, mistakes feel survivable. At higher levels, mistakes feel expensive, emotionally, not just financially. So the brain becomes more vigilant, more cautious, more self-monitoring, more anxious about loss. This is why people who earn more often don't feel as relaxed as expected. Now let's talk about visibility. More money makes you visible, sometimes to family, sometimes to friends, sometimes to yourself. People notice, they comment, they expect, and expectation creates emotional weight. People may ask for help. They may assume you're fine. They may minimize your stress, and you may feel pressure to perform stability, even when you don't feel it. Visibility changes how safe vulnerability feels. Now let's talk about identity conflict. When income rises, identity lags behind. You don't instantly feel like someone who earns this, so there's a mismatch. Your external reality says one thing, your internal self-image says another. This creates imposter syndrome. You question whether you deserve it, whether it will last, whether you're fooling everyone. And that internal tension is exhausting. Now let's talk about decision fatigue. More money creates more options. More options require more decisions. Invest or hold, spend or save, upgrade or wait, help or say no. Each decision consumes mental energy. This is why people with higher incomes often simplify aggressively, not because they don't care, but because constant decision-making drains emotional bandwidth. Now let's talk about fear of loss. Loss aversion grows with success. When you've built something, you fear losing it. So risk tolerance changes. You hesitate, you second guess, you become conservative. Not because you're weak, but because the emotional pain of loss grows as the baseline rises. This is a hidden cost of progress. Now let's talk about relationship strain. Money changes dynamics, not always dramatically, but subtly. Power dynamics shift, expectations shift, resentments can form. Some people feel left behind, some feel dependent, some feel uncomfortable. Even if no one says anything, tension can appear. And navigating that tension requires emotional labor. Now let's talk about responsibility creep. As income grows, people feel pressure to do more, help more, give more, support more, be more available. Even self-imposed expectations create weight. You may feel guilt for enjoying success, guilt for saying no, guilt for prioritizing yourself. That guilt costs energy. Now let's talk about the paradox of security. Money increases security objectively, but subjectively, it can create new fears. Fear of falling back, fear of losing status, fear of being judged. The brain adapts quickly to new baselines. What once felt like abundance becomes normal, and fear re-enters. This is hedonic adaptation. Now let's talk about emotional distance. As people grow financially, they often simplify socially. Not out of arrogance, out of self-preservation. They protect energy. They limit exposure to stress. They avoid conversations that drain. This can look like distance, and that distance has an emotional cost. Now let's talk about loneliness at higher levels. Fewer people relate. Fewer people understand the pressure. Fewer people share your challenges. This doesn't mean success isolates everyone, but it can shrink emotional mirrors. And humans need mirrors. Now, let's talk about the constant sense of responsibility. More money means more to manage. Accounts, taxes, investments, planning. This creates a low-level background tension, not panic, but vigilance. And vigilance is tiring. Now let's talk about why people don't talk about this. Because it sounds ungrateful. People fear saying making more money is emotionally hard. They worry it sounds spoiled, so they stay silent. And silence creates confusion for those still striving. Now let's talk about the real lesson. The emotional cost of making more money is not a reason to avoid growth. It's a reason to prepare for it. Growth without emotional preparation feels overwhelming. Growth with awareness feels manageable. Now let's talk about what helps. Systems reduce emotional load. Automation reduces decision fatigue. Boundaries reduce relationship strain. Identity work reduces imposter syndrome. The goal is not to eliminate emotional cost. It's to prevent overload. Now, let's talk about recalibration. Your emotional system needs time to catch up with your financial system. That's normal. Growth happens faster externally than internally. Patience is required. Now let's talk about emotional maturity. People who handle money well emotionally don't chase more blindly. They pace growth. They protect mental health. They prioritize stability over acceleration. They understand that money is a tool, not a solution. Now let's talk about the final truth. More money does not solve emotional problems. It magnifies existing patterns. If you had anxiety, it becomes more specific. If you had insecurity, it becomes more visible. If you had avoidance, it becomes more costly. This is not a failure. It's feedback. Now let's close with perspective. The emotional cost of making more money is real, but so is the emotional cost of staying small. Stress, fragility, lack of options, constant pressure. The difference is choice. With awareness, the emotional cost of growth becomes manageable. Without awareness, it becomes overwhelming. Money is not just a financial journey, it's an emotional one. And the people who understand that don't just build wealth, they build stability, capacity, and peace alongside it. Not by pretending money fixes everything, but by respecting what it changes. There's another emotional cost of making more money that's rarely acknowledged. It's the loss of emotional simplicity. When money is tight, problems feel clear. You know what you're worried about. You know what needs fixing. You know where your attention goes. As money grows, problems become more abstract. Instead of worrying about survival, you worry about optimization. Instead of worrying about bills, you worry about trade-offs. Instead of worrying about stability, you worry about opportunity cost. These worries are quieter, but they're constant. And because they're less visible, people underestimate how draining they are. Now let's talk about the emotional tax of choice. More money expands the decision space. You can do more, but that also means you must decide more. Every choice closes off another path. Every decision carries imagined regret. Should I invest here or there? Should I upgrade my lifestyle or stay lean? Should I take this risk or protect what I have? These decisions don't disappear once made. They echo. This creates background tension, not anxiety, but vigilance. And vigilance is emotionally expensive over time. Now let's talk about expectation creep. As income rises, expectations quietly follow, not just from others, from yourself. You expect better outcomes, better discipline, better judgment, better results. Mistakes feel heavier. At lower levels, mistakes are learning experiences. At higher levels, mistakes feel like proof you don't belong. This internal pressure increases self-monitoring. Self-monitoring reduces ease. Ease is replaced by performance, and performance is tiring. Now let's talk about emotional isolation. As your financial reality diverges from those around you, certain conversations become harder. Complaints feel awkward. Wins feel uncomfortable. Problems feel unrelatable. So people self-edit. They share less. They simplify stories. They downplay concerns. This emotional editing creates distance, not because of arrogance, but because of mismatch, and mismatch can feel lonely. Now let's talk about the fear of regression. Once you've made more money, falling back feels terrifying. Not just financially, emotionally. It feels like identity loss, like public failure, like personal collapse. So people grip tighter. They become more conservative. They over-control. This tension can steal enjoyment from success. Instead of feeling free, people feel guarded. Now let's talk about internal pressure versus external pressure. Often the heaviest pressure comes from within. People believe, I should be grateful, I shouldn't complain, I should have this figured out. These beliefs suppress emotional processing. Suppressed emotion doesn't disappear. It leaks into irritability, restlessness, burnout, indecision. Now let's talk about emotional adaptation. The brain adapts quickly to new baselines. What once felt extraordinary becomes normal. This is not greed, it's biology. But when adaptation happens faster than emotional meaning, people feel confused. I thought this would feel different. I thought I'd feel safer. I thought I'd feel happier. That gap creates disappointment, and disappointment without understanding creates shame. Now let's talk about the emotional cost of managing other people's perceptions. People may project assumptions onto you that you're set, that you're privileged, that you don't need support. You may feel pressure to downplay struggles. That suppression costs energy. Now let's talk about emotional labor. More money often means more coordination. Managing advisors, managing plans, managing conversations, managing expectations. Each interaction requires emotional presence. Presence costs energy. Now let's talk about why people don't anticipate this. Because financial goals are usually framed numerically. More income, more savings, more net worth. But emotional capacity isn't measured, and growth without capacity feels heavy. Now let's talk about the turning point. People who thrive emotionally as income grows do one thing differently. They invest in emotional infrastructure, systems to reduce decision fatigue, boundaries to reduce social pressure, routines to reduce cognitive load, values to anchor identity. They don't expect money to do emotional work. They do it themselves. Now let's talk about recalibration again. It takes time for emotions to catch up to reality. This lag is normal. The mistake is interpreting lag as failure. It's not. It's integration. Now let's talk about meaning. Money without meaning feels hollow. Meaning without money feels fragile. The goal is alignment. When money supports values, emotional cost drops. When money conflicts with values, emotional cost rises. Now let's talk about emotional honesty. Acknowledging that more money brings emotional weight doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you realistic. Silence doesn't protect mental health. Understanding does. Now let's talk about the final integration. Making more money is not just about earning, it's about expanding capacity. Capacity to handle responsibility. Capacity to sit with ambiguity. Capacity to manage expectation. Capacity to hold complexity without panic. That capacity grows slowly, with awareness, with boundaries, with design. Now let's close with the most important truth. The emotional cost of making more money is real, but so is the emotional cost of staying where you are. The difference is trajectory. Growth costs energy. Stagnation costs options. People who grow consciously don't eliminate emotional cost. They distribute it. They design systems to carry weight. They give themselves time to adapt. They allow discomfort without self-judgment. And over time, what once felt heavy becomes manageable. Not because money solved emotions, but because emotional capacity caught up with financial reality. That's the real work. And it's why the most peaceful people with money aren't the ones who earned the most the fastest. They're the ones who grew at a pace their nervous system could handle.